Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's SCORE webinar, Retirement Planning for Small Business Owners. I'm Steve Smith, the webinar coordinator, and I'm also a business mentor here at SCORE in Fairfield County, and I'll be your host. Our presenter today is Wigzell, and I'll tell you more about Andy in just a minute, but first, for those of you who have heard these webinars before, and I can see some of the names of the people, and you have, I'm going to give you a little blast on SCORE. Some of you may not know, but SCORE has been around since the mid-1960s. It's a part of the U.S. government's Small Business Administration, and across the United States we have over 320 offices. This is, again, the Fairfield County office. On a global basis, or on a U.S. basis, we have over 11,000 volunteers and about 125 or so here in Fairfield County. The counselors and the business mentors here have various degrees of skill and business process knowledge or subject matter expertise. And I guess you would call retirement planning both process and subject matter expertise. And we've tapped into to Andy as an outside speaker to supply the content for today. At SCORE, we really do three primary things. In addition to these webinars, we also have a series of workshops. We probably do 125 to 130 a year. Typically at the venues are the local Fairfield County libraries. All of those workshops as well as these webinars are communicated to you via our email address, and you can find a complete listing of all of the upcoming workshops and webinars at our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org, fairfieldcounty.score.org. We also do one-on-one counseling in our offices at 111 East Avenue in Norwalk. That's usually one-on-one, or sometimes, depending upon the subject, we'll have two mentors to answer your questions and give you some help on everything from getting started to really perfecting that marketing campaign. Our next webinar is going to be 2 weeks from today. I neglected to say that we do them every 2 weeks, and sometimes we throw an extra one in if there are 5 Tuesdays in a month. But the next one will be February 20th, and it's a really good subject. It's how to sell anything to anyone. And again, you'll be getting the specifics on that webinar with marketing communications from fairfieldcounty.score.org, or you can go on there right now and take a look at it. You're also going to receive some reminders, one week in advance and the day of the event, just so you don't lose track of it. Okay, so we're about ready to get started here. We're going to end this sharply at 1 o'clock like we always do, trying to take into account how busy you all are. And the link, this is important because I always get 5 or 6 questions on this. The link to this recording with the slides and the audio will be available later today at fairfieldcounty.score.org. And we've set aside time at the end of the day for Q&A with after Andy's presentation. So as you're listening, put your questions down in the chat room in the lower left-hand column. I'll kind of monitor that and typically wait till the end of the presentation to cover it. But if something really good comes up, you get a prize. We get to answer your question during the presentation. You're also going to be receiving a questionnaire at the end of the webinar to evaluate the quality, and we really appreciate your input on that. Now on to Wigzell, who Andy has over 15 years of industry experience in financial services. He focuses primarily on asset management and, of course, retirement income strategies. He focuses on managing risk and capitalizing on opportunities with consideration of the client's needs and goals. He's been on lots of different media events. He's been a guest on Smart Money Radio Saturday mornings, WICC 600 in Bridgeport, Connecticut, as well as Your Money, a segment for WTNH Channel 8. Andy lives in Trumbull, Connecticut with his wife, Michelle, and their 2 children. Now I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to hand it over to Andy, and I'll be back about 10 minutes to 1 to cover some Q&A. So, Andy, welcome to SCORE, and take it away.
Thanks so much. It's great to be back to do another presentation for SCORE. And please do keep an eye on the chat room. It looks like there's a couple of questions that are coming along already. So thanks very much for spending the next probably 30 or 40 minutes with me. And as Steve mentioned, if there are some sort of timely, very critical questions, we'll make sure that we touch them during the presentation, and there'll be plenty of time for Q&A. Before I get into my prepared remarks, I will tell you always that if you need additional advice or further contact, to get in touch with the SCORE representatives that cover this area. They are a tremendous resource, and where else are you going to get zero-cost training resources for entrepreneurs like ourselves? So with that in mind, I thought that we would get started talking a little bit about retirement income planning. It's important to note that this slide deck is from 2017. The 2018 version is still a work in progress, given all of the changes that have occurred as a result of the tax package that was passed at the end of last year. While I'm not an accountant nor a lawyer, so I can't provide substantial individual tax or legal advice, the idea that there are a number of changes in the tax code that can affect small businesses, closely held business owners like yourselves, is important, whether it's straight line depreciation over a much shorter period of time, the ability to expense capital expenses over a much shorter period of time. All of those are very important. In addition, how corporate structures are held can make an impact on the retirement plans that you might choose. So when you get to a certain level of success, there may be a particular type of retirement plan that might make sense, and depending on your corporate structure now and in the future, that's certainly something that SCORE representatives can talk a little bit about and then connect you with our team so that we can get specific answers to your questions. So with all of that in mind, while the emphasis for closely held business owners, no matter if you're 25 years old or 65 years old, retirement is always something that is hanging out there. And for most business professionals who own and or operate businesses, their personal finance and their business finances tend to be intertwined. So while we say retirement is the next exit, we have to start with the end in mind. In today's agenda, we're going to talk about a number of different items. We're going to talk about some of the risks that we see over time, whether that's longevity risk, overspending, which is something that can happen, particularly in closely held business owners who have to use different sources of income or credit to meet expenses. Inflation, that's the nasty word that popped its head up on Friday and again yesterday, which caused some volatility in the marketplace, which ironically led to the market timing that a lot of people called the office about over the last couple of days, either thinking that this was an emergency or ultimately if it was an opportunity. And then probably the last item, but one that we get the most questions about, is health care expenses and cash reserves, something that we typically call the holy mackerel money. When you slap your forehead and say, holy mackerel, I didn't expect that, what are you going to do about it? So with that in mind, keep those questions coming and we'll get started. Considering that we do need to start with the end in mind, we look at risks first. It's always great to talk about the positives in the market. The wins are easy, and since the change in administration in November of 2016, the market had been moving on a kind of upward moving trajectory. It is really the losses. It is the errors. There's an old adage that I sort of live by. I either win or I learn a lesson. And I think that there are a lot of lessons that were dished out in the last sort of 72 hours. So when we think about retirement, retirement is something that can be discussed when you're 25, 35, 45, 55, 65, 75, or even 85. While your time frames might be different, one of the things that we have started to really notice, and this is data that came, it's a little dated now, October of 2014, came from the Washington Post, that nearly half of all investors fear that they will outlive their savings. I will tell you that there is a fate worse than death. which is waking up one morning and realizing that you have to call your son-in-law to say, I have to come and live with you because I've run out of money. What we do see is that many, many people are beginning to live beyond the average. If you were to look at a male age 65, there is a 50% chance of living to age 85. Same female, age 65, has a 50% chance of living to age 88. The significance there is that that can have sizable impacts on how you might structure your business, particularly if you're in a multi-member LLC, maybe it's a family business, how things can occur with stream of payments at buyout, how if you're using an employee stock purchase plan to buy out the business, how those streams of income can continue even if one of the two partners are the ones who created the business. There may be a surviving spouse. And we see that couples age 65, there's a 50% chance that one person will live to the age of 92. Recognizing how many people we have on the call today, I would suspect that if we asked for a raising of hands, we could probably get to a point where at least one or two or maybe even three of us knew someone over the age of 95 years old. So I don't know if you have the opportunity to click the raise your hands, but if you know someone over the age of 95, please let me know, because given this group in the room that's here, in the media room here at SCORE, there's already two people who know someone over the age of 95. So people are living longer, and longevity is a risk. Oh, look at that. So there's three. Amazing. So 5 total, not bad. So when you start to think about how long is your retirement going to look like, at what age is your retirement going to mature, which is when you pass away, one of the things that we're very focused on when it comes to retirement income planning is what is your budget, your personal inflation. It has been my experience in the almost 20 years that I have worked in this business and in this field that most business owners have a strong understanding of what their profit and loss looks like. They have a budget. They understand how much they need to generate, what their cost of goods and services are on a monthly basis. But then when I ask them, what's your personal budget? What does it take to run your family household budget? There's a number of people who don't really know those numbers, or at least don't know them the way that they feel that they know their businesses. So what we look at is almost like a camel's hump. Our view is that spending is actually not linear. There comes a period in your life where you are ready, willing, and able, both physically as well as financially, to go and spend the money and do what you want. When you're 95 and drooling, you're very cost effective. You get wheeled from the window to the bed and back. That assumes that there's no health care costs. So it's really in the retirement red zones that we are very focused on making sure that people have the highest probability of success. Now, as many of the SCORE individuals and volunteers will tell you, there is an intersection of planning and reality. And what we found is that this slide is a great example. When I went to graduate school, there was a large discussion about the 4% solution. And the 4% solution was you spend your life putting money away, and then ultimately you crack that nest egg and draw out only 4%. If you do that, then in theory, you have a portfolio that should cover the next 30 years. The problem that has sort of reared its ugly head is that we're not sure how long we're going to live, and most people don't spend at a very measured or linear pace. They have families, perhaps they've worked substantially all of their working lives in a business, and now they're looking to, go to Tuscany or go to the Grand Canyon or drive in a Winnebago, around the country bothering their kids. And that all takes money, and understanding what that budget looks like becomes ever more important. So I would encourage, if you've already done a P&L, profit and loss statement, if you have some sense of your corporate budgeting, that's fantastic. If you've never done any of that, get together with the SCORE folks. They're excellent at it. And then take the tools that are learned in those individual meetings with SCORE representatives and then overlay it to your personal spending. That does not mean that you need to keep track of every single cup of coffee that you buy, although there are people who do. my view is that if you have a good understanding of your budget, then that will give you a better understanding of where your money can take you. Just as a side note, Steve, one of the examples I tell people to use in some of the classes that I've taught over the years is a speckled composition book. I don't know if you remember that speckled composition book from grade school. It used to be 200 pages. It's now 100 pages. And it used to be 99 cents, and now it's $1.99. That's the classic example of inflation. I'm paying twice as much for half as many. But if you carry that speckled composition book around for 45 days, and every time you spend money, you write it in the book, it becomes A, a habit, B, because it takes 45 days to do it, statistically you will get one holiday, one birthday, and one special event. And the idea is at the end of that 45-day period, you can take a look at where you spent your money, and that's everything from online bill pay to Dunkin' Donuts coffee. And you can say, well, this is what my personal budget really is. And it is those kinds of exercises that are cheap and easy that can get you started in the right direction. When we think about spending in retirement, the concern is always, are we spending too much? And will our portfolios, whether that's a portfolio of businesses or industries, closely held shares in family businesses, to 401ks or simplified employee pension plans to Roth and regular IRAs. It doesn't really matter what the investment vehicle is. Ultimately, you've got ownership in your business or you've got ownership in shares of U.S. companies. The view is, what is the greatest level of success? The traditional thought had been that a 60% equity and 40% bond portfolio inside your SEP, inside your traditional IRA, was the positioning best likely to receive positive outcome and allow that 4% solution to exist. I would argue today that that opinion may be changing. In an environment where interest rates are going to go up, we're coming off of very, very low levels. The idea that as you grow older, you take 100 minus your age and that equals the amount of bond you own today is probably something that's changing. As people live longer, as personal spending needs to go up, as you see things like Medicare premiums or Florida condo HOAs go up in price, the need to have personal growth in your portfolio to overcome your personal inflation is always very important. So at the end of the day, what is the right stock and bond mix for you? What is the right asset mix for your business? It really depends on your personal needs. And again, I would encourage you to have conversations with some of the SCORE people to really get a sense of not just what your basic needs are, but you know, what are the hopes and dreams and what do they cost? Something that we'll talk a little bit about later in our presentation. Why do we care about all of this? Because costs of goods and services go up. Stopped to get gas here in Fairfield, and it was $2.90 a gallon, give or take. Now, I've had some people, when I've given this presentation, say, wow, that's really great. Where did you get that? I have some people who say, oh, my God, I can't believe you pay that much. But at the end of the day, at the beginning of the Reagan administration, you could buy a car for less than $7,000. Today, the average U.S. car is about $34,000, give or take. Think about your morning cup of coffee. Here in Lower Fairfield County, a medium cream, 1 sugar at a very reputable coffee shop costs $2.06. That's up 100% in just 8 years. And think about the Starbucks that you might have bought today. That half-calf double latte frappuccino unicorn already costs $13, and you get an experience. But think about what it'll cost in your 90s. Right? Would you pay $30 for a cup of coffee? To be determined. Because things that cost $2,000 today will have a value of $826.11 at a 3.6% inflation rate. Now, I have had some younger business owners who don't recall what it was like in the mid-1990s, don't appreciate what interest rates were in the late 1970s. And they say, I just can't imagine that a CD paid 12 or 15%. I can tell you I'm in my mid-40s, and I can remember solidly my grandma from Paoli talking about an 18% CD. Then again, she had a 22.5% mortgage. The argument that gets made today is that the spread between a CD and a mortgage are actually quite similar to the way they were 20, 30 years ago. The difference is you can't live on the money. My grandma from Paoli, with $100,000 invested in the 1980s, was making $18,000 a year. Today, she makes $1,800 a year. Grandmas from Paoli can't live on that. Mortgages 30 years ago were 22.5%. Mortgages today, hopefully there's no mortgage brokers, I'm going to get this wrong, call it 4%, call it 5%. The spread between a CD and a mortgage is the same today as it was in the 1980s. The difference is you can't live on the CD. So what do you do? Where do you put cash reserve? How do you structure your business so that you're getting value for your time deposits, your FDIC deposits? I know that they've had some folks who have come in here from the banking business, and I will tell you they're very good at what they do. In a low interest rate environment where there's nowhere to go but up, things are starting to change, and time deposits will look more favorable. Another item that comes up a lot, and it has come up substantially in the last two or three trading days, has been, is this an emergency or is this an opportunity? And market timing is something that we have tried heavily to dissuade people against. No doubt about it, there are certainly some things, some great businesses that go on sale from time to time. But when you see such a market adjustment as occurred in the last couple of days, people say to me, geez, that hasn't happened. I would tell you that happened 2 years ago, June, July of 2016, when the British voted to Brexit. There was a substantial downdraft in the market over a Friday and a Monday. And by the end of that second day, the market had moved up and had moved on from there, because the markets care about, frankly, stability. They care about not getting surprised. And the thought that there would be tremendous changes in interest rates, there would be tremendous changes in asset bubbles. If you're investing in Bitcoin, I would tell you that that's an asset bubble. But if you think about the businesses that you run today as closely held business owners, your businesses are in no different shape today than they were a week ago. And I would argue, if you look through some of the tax policies that went into place at the end of last year, which are now starting to come to fruition this year, you will see substantial positives in how you can run your business, in your ability to get regulatory relief, and, as you've seen from big companies to small companies, the ability to pay your people a little bit more and have them keep most of what they earn. This slide, and I know it's a little bit difficult to read here, basically takes a look at two brothers, brother on the left, brother on the right. Brother on the left, we'll call him Steve. He retires into a market where there's very positive returns. And as you can see, the rate of return there was 25%, 20%, 16%, 12%, 8%. And he has some success right out of the chute. And then at the end of after they come around the furlong there, he starts to have some negatives, -8, -10, -20. Let's say that the other brother, his name is Bob, and Bob's on the right-hand side. Bob gets exactly the same average return as his brother Steve, except when the gates open, his horse stumbles a little at the first turn. So between the two of them, they get the same average 3.7% return. They both start with $250,000, and they both draw out $12,500 a year. You can see that they end up in vastly different places, primarily Steve buying the beer for Bob at retirement. The idea around this is that the expectation is not just average return over long periods of time. It's really how are you doing plan versus actual. I'm sure that almost everyone on this call has some sort of plan for 2018. And then they take a look at their books and records when they close the month or they close the quarter, and they say, how did we do? What was our plan and what was our actual? Your retirement income planning is no different. You need to have plan and you need to have actual. I think someone said it best earlier today when they said that retirement income planning, or maybe just planning for retirement in general, tends to be lower on the list, 5, 6, or 7, and most closely held business owners don't get past 1 or 2 or 3. I can appreciate that between managing family and businesses, the last thing you want to do when you get home is think about your own retirement. That's why there are people to help you with your business in SCORE, and that's why there are people to help you as a follow-along to SCORE at Barnum Plans. A follow-along to market timing is when people think about, am I retiring into a bear market? Am I retiring into a down market? A bear market is described by the U.S. stock market declining greater than 20% and typically for more than 2 quarters. So what we've seen in the last 2 trading days is really just a correction. A correction is defined by market drawdown, decline in the U.S. stock market by 10%, and it can be short-lived, although it doesn't necessarily have to be. So anything 10% but less than 20% is considered a correction. There are corrections every year, with the exception of really last year, and there's a great slide out on the Barnum Plans website, and we can certainly get it to the SCORE people if you're interested. Going back to 1980 through the end of last year, the average correction in the U.S. markets was a little over 13%. You may not remember that, but there are items such as President Obama going nose-to-nose about the debt ceiling and causing sequestration, the adjustment in the Chinese economy, GDP calculations, and not 1 but 2 Greek debt crises. Both of those, along with everything else, have caused market adjustments, negative returns, corrections, something like that, between 10 and 15%. Those are very normal and they're very natural, but they do have a substantial impact on your assets, right? There were these commercials where people used to walk around with big numbers, right? And they said, what's your number? My view is it's not the number, it's what the income that the number can provide to you on a sustainable basis. So understanding what your budget is and how you work is very important. What is likely to be one of your largest and most unpredictable retirement expenses? The answer is healthcare. And as you have experienced already as a closely held business owner, you will continue to experience, whether you're in the marketplace or you're buying through an affinity group or you're winging it, you're part of your family's group. The idea here is that particularly for age 65-year-olds, the estimated need to cover medical expenses for the balance of their life is a hefty sum. That covers a number of items. Keeping in mind that you may currently be on a family plan. As a Medicare recipient, they are individual plans only, so premiums, while lower than perhaps out in the marketplace, is actually a premium per person. And there are things like donut holes where there's costs that are not covered, and there is the need to pay coinsurance and copays. So Medicare doesn't cover everything. You are going to be required to pick up some of those payments. The other item, which is probably a webinar on its own, is to talk about healthcare risks that are related to long-term care and the associated planning services. People who have organic brain disease, dementia, something that's a cognitive function, it is an unbelievable adjustment to people, whether they're in their 40s, 50s and taking care of sick or elderly parents, to spouses who have been together for 50 years and are watching their person waste away, and how that can potentially deplete income and savings, and what business owners can do today to perhaps reinsure some of those risks, and in some cases make that somewhat tax deductible, are the kinds of things that are really the elegant planning that can be done today, particularly after the changes in the tax code. Just cognizant of our time, let's talk a little bit about the planning process. If you remember nothing, do remember that I look like Brad Pitt, and that this is our planning process. The planning process, this is easily something you can take a picture on your computer screen with right now on your phone, and you could spend an entire year just working on this slide. First, you have to determine what your retirement goals are. When would you like to punch out? How do you want to do it? Do you want to sell your business to a third party, someone that you've met as part of a business brokerage relationship? Are you going to sell your business to a closely held family member? Are you going to bring in a second, third, fourth generation? What about selling it to a group of employees who you know will take care of the business? How do you help them finance that without being on the hook for essentially a loan back to those employees? All of those things are things that need to be thought about, even if they're just in an abstract way. Ultimately, do you stay here in Connecticut? We are currently a parentheses state. New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Oregon, Oregon, California, all of those states have seen substantial changes in the way that tax revenue will be collected. We've nicknamed it the SALT deductions, which is state and local taxes. Those have definitely changed for us. Will you be moving west, young man? Will you be headed to Florida? The idea is what that looks like is important to get that written down so that people can, when you're doing the planning, understand what the tax code might look like down the road. Then we look at your expenses. So we look at retirement needs and we look at retirement wants. Retirement needs are fairly straightforward. It's food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, liquor. Again, food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, liquor. Most everyone calls it entertainment, but I've seen enough spreadsheets in my 20 years to know what it is. Beyond that is the retirement wants. How many times do you want to go to Italy? How many times do you want to go to the Grand Canyon? How many times do you want to fly back up to the Northeast to see your grandkids? How do you make those work? And once you get those quantified, we need to look at what dependable income streams can you count on and what variable income streams do you need to focus on. Once we know what those income streams are and where they're coming from, we need to make sure we have that cash reserve that is available both for those unexpected expenses, but also for those opportunities. Your number one competitor decides to leave the business before you do and calls you. Hey, I want to sell my business. I want to punch out. Can you help me do that? That might be a huge opportunity. You have to have the liquidity and the diversified sort of business to be able to take advantage of that. What's your vision for retirement? I never understood the graphics of this slide. The guy in the middle, I think he's cutting grass, but I'm not 100% sure. Are you going to spend more time outside? Are you going to do more active things? Are there a list of things that you want to do because you felt you weren't able to do them while you were working on your business? Very important to get those down on paper. Very important to understand that if you like the mountains and your spouse likes the beach, there's probably a negotiation there somewhere. What is your retirement actually going to cost you? We will typically do a present value of the future stream of retirement income that you need. So you'll know what your number is. That might help you with business valuation. That might help you as a yardstick to where has your 401k or your cross-tested profit sharing plan or your SEP IRA, your SEP, or even your Roth IRA, where has it grown to, so that you have some better understanding of whether or not you're close to retirement or not. Where will the income come from in order to pay some of those expenses? Is it going to be a structured sale of your business over a period of time with a consulting fee? Is it going to be a straight sale? Is there some hang-up that says if all the customers don't come, there may be a chargeback, something like that? Those are all things that we're very focused on, beyond just Social Security, beyond just retirement planning in the traditional ways, 401k and SEP. For many businesses, particularly those that might operate on a cash basis, it's always a struggle. What do I show? What do I declare? And what are the benefits if I do that? I'm giving up an upfront benefit today for some benefit in the future. Understanding how your Social Security planning works is very important. For those of you who might be in the trades, you might be physicians, you might be dentists, you might be plumbers, you might be electricians. Those are all businesses that can create defined benefit or pension plans. These are a little bit more sophisticated. They're definitely not a 101 item, but for many businesses, particularly multi-generational businesses, they are a way for employees or younger generations to begin the buyout process for older generations. That's on top of the CDs and the bond ladders and the annuities and all the things that can generate guaranteed or predictable income streams. If you don't have any of these and you're not familiar with any of these, start with SCORE. Give them an understanding of your business, and if the thought is that we need to do some more advanced planning, they will certainly connect you with us. When we move from from sort of the 201 to back to the 101, we can see that there are flexible income sources, things like 401ks, 403bs if you're married to the governor or in the teacher's business or work at the hospital, IRAs, a very simple way to get started, as well as simplified employee pension plans, which is a type of IRA for closely held business owners. The thought might be, hey, can I put my adolescent child on, have them file their own return, and then take a tax deduction by putting money into an IRA? That way my child can start the process of building for their own retirement. I can maybe use a Roth program so that they can start building for their education. I can do employee assistance programs or tuition reimbursement programs, all of which can be deductible. You'll need to check with your tax advisor, but ways that you can monetize successful businesses so that you as the business owner, can get more out of your business. One comment about savings bonds. There's a great website. If you just Google Savings Bond Wizard, it will take you to a website that looks like it was designed by my 7-year-old daughter. It's from the U.S. Treasury Department. It will allow you the opportunity to key in all of your savings bonds, serial numbers, and dates. I recommend that either you do that on a rainy Sunday or you hire your teen child to do it and you pay them and then you have them make a Roth contribution. By doing that, you will be able to get a sense for whether or not your savings bonds that your grandma gave you 30 years ago are actually earning any money today. You'd be surprised. There are several bonds that are still floating around today, Series EE, that are earning greater than 5%. That's essential. Newer ones issued in the last few years are earning typically less than 1%. Could that be a source of income that can help drive business productivity for you if it's just really kind of a dormant, dead asset not earning anything? Take it to the bank branch, turn it in, get the 1099, and now you have cash flow that might get you through to the next order. So how do your sources of income match up to your projected assets? That's always the big risk. We typically see people who, if they're successful business owners, they may be using their business as a bank. That's not to say that you can't write off the lease on your car. It just means that it has to be done in a way that passes muster. Never in my career do I want to show this slide that says, Mr. and Mrs. Client, you need to either work longer or spend less. Neither one of those are particularly good, although I will tell you a number of people that I meet through the SCORE program are very interested in extending their career. They just want to extend it on their own terms. They want to work part-time in their business because they want to see the fruits of their labor come to fruition. And in many cases, they are lowering they're downsizing their home or considering a move. So, what is the right approach? My view is that you split the fairway. Do you need to have full flexibility? If you have full flexibility, you're giving up some of that dependability. If you have complete dependability, you have no flexibility for emergencies or opportunities. And don't worry about what the investments are on the slide here. What matters is that you have some balance. You want to remain in control while keeping flexibility. So I'm just cognizant of the time. A couple of takeaways sort of in conclusion, and then we'll open it up to questions. Some takeaways include your needs in retirement should be covered by income sources that last a lifetime. Keeping in mind that many of the traditional income sources people rely on have not kept up with personal inflation. Twice in the last 5 years, Social Security had a zero cost of living adjustment. So be cognizant of what your income sources are and how they are maybe personal inflation adjusted. Another item to bring attention to is determining what your income allocation is. There's plenty of people who will come on, plenty of websites and calculators that will tell you what your asset allocation should look like. What should the pie chart look like? Almost no one tells you how to crack the nest egg. And I will be the first to tell you most of the accidents on Everest happen on the way down, not on the way up, right? Because everyone's very focused on the way up, and everyone says, oh, I made it, and then they sort of trot down, not realizing that the same risks exist. Understanding income allocation, how do you crack the nest egg, is very important. And then lastly, retirement income planning is not an easy feat. If everyone did it, I wouldn't be relevant. However, there is a process that's here to help. The fact that you came to these webinars, whether it's the one that we're doing today or some of the others that will be presented by SCORE, you have overcome one of the biggest stumbling blocks or roadblocks in the business that I work in, which is procrastination. Nobody has enough time. Everyone thinks that it's seventh on the list. And what happens is one day they realize, oh, my God, it's very important to me because I'm closer to that seventh item on the list than I ever was before. So what I would tell you is I will open it up for some questions. I certainly will leave you with this disclaimer from our compliance team. We don't provide tax or legal advice. You really should consult your tax advisor or your attorney. And if you don't have one, work with SCORE. SCORE has a number of affiliates that can and resources that can refer you. And at the end of the day, if you're not sure where to go, call SCORE and they'll come and find me. So with that, Steve, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, great, Andy. Excellent. Excellent on the timing, excellent on the content. Thanks for the plugs for SCORE. I've got a couple of questions here. Ed Schindler asked this question about an hour ago. And he was a very, very patient guy, and he really did. It was about 2 minutes after the hour. I'll read it to you. You can read it as well and just kind of noodle on it while I'm reading. My wife and I each have a SS, I assume that's Social Security retirement account. Mine is larger. We would like to start hers with me as spouse, and then when I hit 70, switch to mine with her as spouse. Can you do this without a penalty?
The answer is it will depend on your age. So there was a tax law change that occurred in the last year of the Obama administration, not that I'm giving tax or legal advice, but that said if you were born before a certain date, and forgive me for not knowing the date off the top of my head, but I think it's March 1st, 1950, the ability to do that, which was called Social Security maximization, is now very difficult. That's not to say it's not impossible. I don't know anything about you, and I would argue that we should probably have a conversation, more in-depth conversation offline. So if you meet certain age tenets, it's called file and suspend. It is possible to still do it, although I will tell you that it may not be as attractive as it once was, and the alternatives are a little bit more complicated, but they can be just as successful. So I don't want to sound like a lawyer because I'm not one, but it does depend.
Okay, good. To those of you out there, we do have some time left, so please put your questions in, and we'll do the best we can to answer them. I have a question here. I hope I pronounced this correctly. I'm going to call it Phoebe, although I thought Phoebe had an O in it. But she's asked a question about a specific organization called the World Financial Group, which she says is a multi-level marketing company owned by Transamerica, and the associates of which are compensated by selling financial services products and receiving commission overrides from people that agents sponsor into the company. So her question is, what do you think of them? I kind of know what you're going to say, but anyway.
What I would tell you is I don't know the group specifically. There are other organizations that have sort of operated in that same kind of program. I will tell you that the advice that you get should be from people who are licensed, they are registered, and there are websites that you can go and check. I will tell you that broker check, if you just Google the words broker check, that's a great way. That'll take you to the federal website for the SEC and FINRA being a large regulatory body in my business, and you can look up almost everyone. You have to know their name, and you have to know their state, and zip code is helpful, and read about them. That'll tell you disclosures, are they positive or they're negative. And I think ultimately you have to have a discussion with people that says, tell me why this is important, tell me where this works in. One of the things that I've always been a little suspect on is if somebody leads with a particular product versus leading with a plan. So, most people will say if I don't have a plan to succeed, I have a plan to fail. And my view is that if somebody comes to you and says that this bright, shiny object is exactly what you need without doing the kind of data gathering that would be necessary to really understand you, I would tell you that that's probably a suspect group. Do I think that World Financial is a suspect group? I couldn't say one way or the other because I don't know them personally, but a little due diligence goes a long way.
All right, good answer. I have one for you. You mentioned maybe halfway through your presentation, you made reference to the fact that many people probably don't remember the hyperinflation days that, I do. I remember, and I don't think I'm probably as old as your grandmother, but I remember those 18% floating mortgage rates, and I remember getting raises like 15% a year, and it's like, I remember all that stuff, and it's crazy. Lots of people have either never experienced that or they've forgotten about what it is, and we've been living at this 2.8 10-year for a really long time, or less, 2.4 even. So, part of what could be happening here, if you read between the lines of all these analysts who are, and probably part of the reason why I think the market kind of went, has kind of corrected by 10%, is people are expecting the Fed maybe to start putting making some moves on interest rates and getting us off of this 2.5 10-year that's been there since 2009 or 2010. So if you were in the midlife running your own business, and you saw this cloud starting to build on the horizon, what would be some of the things you look for to kind of help you get ready to make a move, not to be a victim of it, but to kind of like anticipate it a little bit? Really complicated question and too long, but I apologize, but have a go at it.
Actually, I think that's a great question. My view is, and it's something that my old man used to say, you bang on the roof when it's sunny, not when it's raining. So as I had said before, you start with the end in mind, which is, where are you today? If you're in your mid-40s or mid-50s and you see on the horizon another 10, 15, 20 years of working, a rising interest rate environment is not going to be something that you really have to worry about long term. We certainly would have to worry about it short term, say through Friday. But at the end of the day, the Fed raising interest rates gets a lot of press in Fox News and in CNBC, but it is the worst kept secret in Fed policy. There's going to be Fed increases. And if you look at why the Fed will be increasing, it is exactly the reason why there's so many people on this SCORE webinar. Unemployment is near historic lows. Unemployment today is lower than it was when I was born, August 2nd of 1972. So if anyone does have August 2nd as their birthday, raise their hand, because we have enough people, there should be one of you. Beyond that, the thought is with the stimulus that was injected as a result of the tax cuts, your business people are seeing that today. You will see, I would think, the unemployment rate continue to decline and get to somewhere around 4%, maybe even 3.5%. That is unbelievable. It hasn't been seen since Levittown was created in the 1950s. And as a result of all of that, wages have to go up, and that's because the economy is sort of running on all cylinders. So if you think about where your business owners are today, they are at the cusp of probably an appreciation for the U.S. economy has expanded as much as it can, at least in the near term. Corrections like we saw yesterday and on Friday are very healthy because it allows us to reload. And you think about those businesses that are just as successful today as they were on Thursday, whether it's Boeing that got clipped by $50 and just announced a $1 billion order with a particular airline, to the guy who decides to put 2 ice cream trucks on in the summer instead of 1. Those are all growing businesses. And my view is that for many of your listeners, and frankly many of the SCORE clients, they shouldn't be fearing the rates. They should be happy about the rates, because what it says is that their businesses should be moving in the right direction.
Yeah, all right, good. Thanks for that. I've got 2 more questions. One here is a good question from one of our participants in the webinar, Daiwei Torre, and she's a small business owner. She has 2 full-time employees, and the rest of her are subcontractors. It says, my question to you is, what is the best way for me to invest in my retirement? Now, before you answer that, I'm going to answer her next question, which was, how do I go about getting a mentor for my business? To go to the fairfieldcounty.score.org website, Daiwei, and you will see an ability to click on Request Counseling, and just put your name, your specifics in there, and somebody from SCORE who will get back to you. Now back to her question about she's got 2 full-time employees and the rest of the staff are subs. What's the best way for me to invest in my retirement?
I think it will depend a little bit on the age of your employees as well. Again, I don't want to give specific advice over the air without asking you another 100 questions, but what I would tell you is that once you do connect with your SCORE advisor, make sure that you connect with us. My view is that depending on the size of your business, the cash flow of your business, and the projections for how well it's going to perform over the next couple of years, there are a number of different ways to do it. There are ways that you can be very generous to your employees and provide matching contributions in a 401k plan, provide profit-sharing contributions inside what's called an ABC Plus plan. Those are ways that you can participate in the retirement planning process for yourself and provide something for your employees. If the thought is that they're varying ages or they're quite young, age-based compensation in retirement planning might not be particularly suitable for them. They may say, well, we're only here for a couple of years and we want to move on to something else, maybe just matching contributions into a Roth program. If it's a very high cash business, high income business, and there's a need to segregate between different aged employees or different groups of employees, then things like profit sharing plans or even defined pension plans are ways that you can get tremendous upfront tax deductions while simultaneously giving bulks of dollars to key employees. So it sort of really depends on what the structure of the business is. Are you an S Corp? Are you a C Corp? It depends on what you're looking to do. I've had plenty of people say to me, I'm in business for myself. I'm not in business for my employees. I've had just as many people say to me, hey, listen, I love my employees, and without them, I would be nowhere. Although Richard Branson stole that tagline and he's not a client, I'm one who says if you take care of key employees, they'll take care of your business. So do connect with SCORE. Go to the website. Make sure that you get a good counselor. And when the time comes, make sure that counselor connects with any of the group here to get in touch with me and my group, and we'll make sure that we can give you kind of what we call a retirement plan audit. Where are you? We ask you some simple questions, and then from there we sort of say, well, now that we've done some data gathering, once we have an appreciation for your plan, now let's talk about those strategies that might be implemented to get you to where you want to be.
All right, good one. So I'm going to ask you, again, we've still got 10 minutes, so anybody online there who wants to ask a question, have it answered, please Andy it up here. But while you were talking, Andy, my colleague asked a question like, how, in terms of selling a business, how to build a plan for selling your business, and how should that fit into your retirement plan? So it's, you always build a plan, you buy the business, you have a business plan, you kind of run the business plan. How do you plan for selling it, and how does that fit into your retirement planning?
That is an excellent question, and one that comes up on a sort of an ad hoc basis. There are groups of professionals today who are in the business planning, business valuation business. So they are financial planners. They are folks who report into me, and their primary responsibility is to work with those people who are thinking about their exit strategy. And that can be a closely held business owner. It can be the owner of a Mazda dealership who's trying to sell it to their employees. And what ends up happening is that it is, in my experience, although it's anecdotal because I listen to what these guys say in our meetings, that runway is much longer than people think. Your discussions with how do you punch out of your business happens years before it happens, not months or even just a year or two. They might end up being partnered with your CFO or your bookkeeper or your accountant to make sure that all of those items are going in the right way based on how you're going to structure your sale. Is it going to be to build a loyal revenue-producing base that is easily transferable to an independent third-party owner? If that's the case, then there's a way to pivot your business so that it looks good in the business brokerage market, those people who do the valuations, who go out and sell those businesses. If you're selling it to closely held family members, so it's a transfer of stock to a spouse, to kids, to anyone but the mother-in-law. The idea is that the organization needs to be structured in perhaps a different way so that the income streams still continue. And ultimately, you have to decide, going back to some of the earlier questions about what does your planning process look like, you have to think about what's the exit strategy. Do you want to receive an income for a large period of time, or are you looking for a cash out, and then what happens to the business in years 2 or 3 or 4 is really up to those new acquirers. So I would certainly encourage a connection with our group. They are folks who have taken specific planning courses. They have a legal background. They're able to look at contracts. They're able to look at financial statements and then be able to say, what are we going for here? If we're going for a public sale, are we going for a private transaction, or are we doing an intra-family sale? How you structure that business can be very different, but all worthwhile. And 8 out of the 10 steps are all the same. So what are those 8 steps to where you get to an inflection point or a pivot point that says, where do I go from here? Great question, and one probably a long-winded answer, but it can be several years in the making to get that answer, but it becomes very successful when someone can say, I sold my business, I knew exactly how I was going to do it, I knew exactly what I was going to get, and the transaction went with very few hiccups.
All right, great, good. So I think what we're going to do is go ahead and shut it down. I'm going to ask anybody else. We do have a couple minutes yet, 1 or 2 minutes to ask any additional questions, but while I'm kind of watching the chat room, let me just say that, obviously, as I said before, we do have these webinars twice a month, sometimes 3 times a month, on the first and third Tuesdays of the month. And the next one is February 20th, and the topic is selling anything to anyone. And it's a topic that's got to be near and dear to a lot of your hearts. So on behalf of SCORE, I'd like to thank you all for attending, and a special thanks to Andy for presenting and answering the questions in a very, very professional manner. And again, please visit fairfieldcounty.score.org, and especially Daiwei, that for you, wanting specifically for some counseling, you please do that, and we'll get back to you. So everybody out there, again, thanks for joining, and have a very nice day. Bye-bye.